The millionaire opened his employee's lunchbox, and what he found inside made him fall in love. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. Ethan Carter had always been known for his ruthless business mind. As the CEO of one of the most successful tech companies in the country, he was a man who had everything: money, power, and influence. His life was meticulously crafted, filled with luxury, fast cars, and high-end restaurants. But all of that seemed to lose its appeal when he sat in the company cafeteria on a quiet afternoon, waiting for his lunch. He was dressed casually for the first time in a long while, but the million-dollar suit still seemed to weigh on him, a constant reminder of his role as the powerful boss. As he waited, his eyes wandered around the cafeteria, landing on Claire, one of his junior employees. She was sitting alone at a table in the corner, eating from a simple lunchbox. The lunchbox was nothing special, just a plain plastic container with a few homemade sandwiches and a couple of pieces of fruit. Ethan raised an eyebrow, noticing how content she seemed despite the modest meal. There was something oddly captivating about her simplicity. Claire had no idea that her lunch was about to become the catalyst for a life-changing moment. Ethan, always curious and eager to understand people beyond their status, decided to approach her. He had heard the office rumors, how she was always working late, how she had a no-nonsense attitude and never tried to fit in with the high society of their corporate world. She wasn't like the others, the ones who flaunted their designer clothes or talked about their weekend getaways. Claire was different. He walked over, casually sitting across from her. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice low but friendly. Claire looked up, a little startled, but then smiled politely. "Of course, Mr. Carter." She wasn't exactly sure why he had approached her. Most of the senior management people barely acknowledged her presence in the office. Ethan took a bite of his sandwich, noticing how different it tasted from the overpriced meals he usually had. There was something refreshing about it. "I couldn't help but notice your lunch," he said, setting his sandwich down. "You always bring the same thing, don't you?" Claire laughed softly, a bit embarrassed. "Yes, it's just simple. I prefer homemade meals. They remind me of my mom." Ethan's curiosity grew. He could tell there was more to Claire than met the eye, and he found himself intrigued by her. "It's nice," he said, studying her for a moment. Most people would be too embarrassed to bring something so humble. Claire shrugged, not thinking much of it. "It's just lunch, after all. Food's food." Ethan couldn't help but smile. There was something refreshing about her lack of pretense, something that he hadn't encountered in a long time. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of genuine connection with someone who wasn't after his money or position. "You're not like the others," Ethan said, his voice softer now. Claire paused, looking up at him with a hint of confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked. Ethan leaned back in his chair, thinking for a moment. "You don't seem to care about all the things people in this company obsess over. You're real." Claire felt a slight flush rise to her cheeks, unsure how to respond. "I just do my job," she said, her voice steady but quiet. "I'm not interested in the politics of the office. I just want to make a difference." Ethan was taken aback. He had always assumed that everyone in his company had an agenda, that everyone was in it for the climb up the corporate ladder. But Claire, she seemed different. Her passion, her simplicity, her ability to just focus on what mattered, it was refreshing. And for some reason, it made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. He stood up, about to leave, but before he could, he turned back to Claire. "You know," he said, "I think I might just have to stop by for lunch with you more often." Claire smiled, but this time, there was a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "I'll save you a seat," she said, a playful tone in her voice. Ethan grinned, a feeling of excitement bubbling inside him. For the first time in years, he found himself looking forward to something beyond business. It has been a week since Ethan started joining Claire for lunch, and with each day that passed, their conversations grew more meaningful. What had started as a casual interaction had now become an anticipated part of Ethan's routine. No longer just a quick exchange of pleasantries. Their time together felt genuine, something that Ethan had longed for but never realized until now. Every day, he looked forward to seeing her, to hearing her stories, her thoughts, and her simple yet profound perspective on life. Claire was nothing like the people he usually interacted with in his world of high-powered meetings, expensive dinners, and press conferences. There was no pretense, no hidden agenda, just an honest person doing her best to make her way through the world. It was refreshing. He felt something in her presence that he had been missing for so long, but he wasn't ready to admit it, not yet. He couldn't afford to be distracted by emotions. He had a company to run, an empire to manage. And yet, as each day went by, he found himself more and more intrigued by Claire, even a little obsessed with her. He had never been one to feel such things. The moment she entered the cafeteria, he could already hear her laugh from across the room, and that sound, light and unburdened, made him feel a sense of calm he hadn't known in years. One afternoon, Claire had surprised him. She had arrived with a new lunchbox, this time, a vibrant, colorful one filled with fresh ingredients. There were no more simple sandwiches or basic fruit. She had gone all out with a homemade salad and grilled chicken. Ethan watched her as she meticulously arranged her meal, then sat down across from him. "What's this?" he asked with a smile, trying to keep the curiosity out of his voice. Claire looked up, a small grin tugging at her lips. "What can I say? I decided it was time to change things up a little," she said casually. Ethan's curiosity spiked. He had never seen anyone so casual about life, so unbothered by the expectations that others carried around. "You know," he said, leaning forward slightly, "I have to admit, you're unlike anyone I've ever met." Claire raised an eyebrow, but her expression remained friendly. "That's a good thing, right?" she teased. Ethan hesitated for a moment, not sure how to respond. He had to be careful. Claire was just an employee. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable. "Yeah," he said after a beat. "It's definitely a good thing." Their lunch was interrupted by a few colleagues who approached to chat. Claire excused herself briefly to greet them, but Ethan stayed seated, feeling strangely unsettled. He couldn't pinpoint it exactly, but something about Claire had started to fill a void in his life, a part of him that he didn't even know existed. Later that afternoon, as Claire prepared to leave, Ethan followed her to the elevator, something pulling him to ask her a question he had been thinking about all day. "Do you ever think about where you'll be in the future?" he asked. The elevator door slid open, and Claire stepped inside, glancing at him. She smiled softly. "I think about it sometimes," she said, "but I try not to get too caught up in it. Life's a bit too unpredictable for that." Ethan leaned against the door frame as the elevator ascended. There was something about her attitude, her lack of concern for the future, that captivated him. Most people were driven by their ambitions and goals. Claire, however, seemed content to simply live in the moment. "Do you mind if I ask you something personal?" Ethan said, his voice a little more serious now. Claire glanced at him, raising her eyebrows. "What's up? Why don't you want more?" "More than this, than working here?" he asked, gesturing vaguely to the office building around them. "You're smart, talented. You could go far." Claire took a moment to think before answering. "I've thought about it," she said finally. "But the thing is, I'm not sure I want all of that. The pressure, the competition, it's exhausting. I just want to do something meaningful. If I can do that here, then I'm happy." Ethan stared at her for a moment, his mind racing. It was such a simple answer, but one that completely baffled him. Why wasn't she more ambitious? More hungry for success? Then it hit him. He didn't understand because he had never experienced life from her perspective. All he knew was success and achievement. But Claire, she wanted balance, simplicity. The elevator dinged, and Claire stepped off, leaving Ethan standing there, lost in thought. Over the next few days, Ethan's mind kept drifting back to Claire. It wasn't just her lunchbox anymore. It was her outlook on life, her way of living in the moment. He wanted to know more, understand why she was so content with what seemed like so little. But what he didn't realize was that Claire had begun to change too. She had started looking at him differently. No longer just the CEO of the company, Ethan had become someone she admired. He was approachable, real, and there was something about him that made her feel like she could open up. But that was the problem. She wasn't sure if she should let herself fall for him. Ethan was her boss, he was her superior, and Claire had never been one to mix business with pleasure. Still, she couldn't deny that the more time she spent with him, the more she began to feel something more than just admiration. Something deeper, something that scared her. It has been 2 weeks since Ethan and Claire's lunchtime interactions became a routine, and with each passing day, their bond seemed to deepen, yet neither of them was ready to confront what was clearly growing between them. Ethan had continued to visit Claire in the cafeteria, sitting across from her as they shared meals and exchanged casual conversation. But behind his eyes, something was shifting. He was no longer just the CEO of a powerful company. He was now someone who looked forward to the simple moments they shared. For the first time in years, he found himself looking forward to something beyond business meetings and corporate strategies. Claire, on the other hand, had started noticing the subtle changes in her feelings. She had always been focused on her work, not allowing anything to distract her. But Ethan was different. He made her feel seen in a way that no one else ever had. He was kind, genuine, and surprisingly down to earth for someone of his stature. But she couldn't deny the fear creeping into her heart. Was she falling for him? Was it worth it to risk everything for someone who was, at the end of the day, her boss? That afternoon, as Claire was getting ready to leave the office, Ethan appeared at her desk. "Hey, Claire," he said, leaning against the edge of her cubicle. "Do you mind if we talk for a minute?" Claire looked up from her work, surprised by the request, but nodding in agreement. "Sure. What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice casual, though she could feel her pulse quicken. Ethan hesitated for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I've been thinking a lot about something," he began, his tone serious. "I know we've only been talking for a few weeks, but I feel like there's something between us. I want to know if I'm just imagining things, or if you feel it too." Claire's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped that Ethan might say something like this, but now that he had, she wasn't sure how to respond. She swallowed hard, trying to remain calm. "Ethan," she started, her voice softer now, "I've enjoyed our lunches. I really have. But I'm not sure what you mean by something between us." Ethan leaned closer, his expression earnest. "What I mean is, I think I'm starting to care about you, Claire. I can't just ignore it anymore. But I also don't want to make things awkward for you. You're my employee, and I don't want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable." Claire felt her heart race as she processed his words. This was it. The moment she had been dreading and, at the same time, hoping for. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her, but at the same time, she couldn't ignore the warmth that had been growing inside her every time she saw him. She finally spoke, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. "Ethan, I don't know what to say. I've been thinking a lot about us too. But we both know the risks, don't we? You're my boss, and I can't just ignore that. I've always kept my personal life separate from work. It's the only way I've been able to stay focused. I don't want to complicate things." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding her hesitation. "I get it," he said quietly. "I don't want to rush you, Claire. I respect your decision, no matter what. I just wanted to be honest with you." There was a long pause between them, both of them trying to find the right words. Ethan's gaze softened as he looked at Claire, his expression a mix of understanding and vulnerability. "I don't want to pressure you, but I think you're someone special, Claire. I'm willing to take the risk if you are." Claire's breath caught in her throat. She had always been the practical one, the one who kept her emotions in check. But now, she was faced with a decision that could change everything. She looked at Ethan, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. I don't know if I'm ready for this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't want to lose what we've started either." Ethan smiled softly, reaching out and gently taking her hand in his. "We don't have to figure it all out right now," he said. "Let's just take it one step at a time. Whatever happens, I just want to get to know you more, Claire." Claire felt a sense of relief wash over her. She wasn't sure where this would lead, but she realized that she didn't have to have all the answers just yet. Maybe the first step was simply being open to whatever came next. "Okay," she said, squeezing his hand. "One step at a time." Later that evening, as Claire walked to her car, she felt a strange mixture of excitement and uncertainty. She had never been one to mix her personal life with work, but there was something about Ethan that made her feel safe, something that made her want to take that leap. As she got into her car and started the engine, she couldn't help but smile to herself. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't seem so uncertain. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of something real. It has been a few days since Claire and Ethan agreed to take things one step at a time, but now the tension between them was palpable. Ethan could no longer deny the growing feelings he had for her. Every time she smiled at him, or when they exchanged a brief touch, something inside him stirred. He had been avoiding these emotions for so long, but now, with Claire, they were undeniable. He had spent years building his empire, focusing on wealth and success, but Claire made him realize that there was more to life than just business. She brought out a side of him he had long since buried. Claire, too, had begun to question everything she thought she knew about her life. She had always been focused on keeping her personal life separate from work. She had no room for distractions. But with Ethan, it was different. She found herself looking forward to seeing him, not just because of his position in the company, but because of who he was, a man who, despite his wealth and power, was genuine and kind. She had never expected to feel this way about her boss, but the feelings were growing stronger each day. She couldn't deny it anymore. One afternoon, as Ethan entered the cafeteria, he saw Claire sitting alone at a table by the window. He walked toward her, his heart racing a little faster than usual. She looked up as he approached, and a small smile appeared on her lips. "Hey, Ethan," she greeted him, her voice warm. "Hey," he replied, taking a seat across from her. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The comfortable silence between them was more telling than words. Ethan finally broke the silence. "You know," he said, his voice a little more serious than usual, "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about last week." Claire raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" she asked, setting down her fork. Ethan shifted in his seat, trying to gather his thoughts. "About us," he said carefully. "I know we agreed to take things slow, but I can't help feeling like there's something more here. Something real." Claire's heart skipped a beat. She had known this conversation was coming, but hearing him say it aloud made her stomach flutter with nerves. She hadn't expected him to bring it up so soon. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice trembling just slightly, "I think about it too. But I'm scared. I've always kept my professional and personal lives separate for a reason. If this doesn't work out, things could get complicated." Ethan reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. "I understand your fear," he said gently, "but I'm not asking you to make any decisions now. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm willing to take the risk if you are." Claire looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of doubt. But all she saw was sincerity. He wasn't just saying these things to win her over. He meant it. And that scared her even more. What if she let herself fall for him, and it didn't work out? What if everything changed, and she lost both her job and him in the process? She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. "I've never been someone who takes risks, Ethan. My whole life has been about security, about making sure I'm in control. But with you, I don't feel in control anymore. And that terrifies me." Ethan smiled softly, understanding her hesitation. "It's okay to be scared, Claire. I'm scared too. But maybe that's what makes this real. We don't have to have all the answers right now. We can take it one day at a time and figure it out as we go." Claire's heart softened as she listened to him. Maybe he was right. Maybe they didn't need to have everything figured out. Maybe they just needed to take that first step and see where it led. She squeezed his hand, a small but meaningful gesture. "One step at a time," she agreed. Ethan's smile widened, and for the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of peace. He had been so caught up in the demands of his life that he had forgotten what it felt like to just be present, to enjoy the simple moments. Claire had brought that back into his life. "You know," Ethan said after a beat, "I think this is the beginning of something good." Claire nodded, her eyes soft. "I hope so." As they sat together, eating lunch and talking about everything and nothing, they both realized that the future was uncertain, but that was okay. They didn't need to know every detail, every outcome. They just needed to be willing to try. Ethan looked at Claire, his heart full of hope. He had spent so much time building his empire, but he was starting to understand that sometimes the most important things in life weren't things at all. They were moments, connections, and the people who made those moments meaningful. And right now, Claire was the most meaningful person in his life. Claire, too, felt a sense of calm wash over her. She had always prided herself on being practical, on having everything in order. But for the first time, she realized that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let go and trust someone else. Ethan had shown her that sometimes the best things in life came when you least expected them. And with him by her side, maybe, just maybe, she could allow herself to take that risk. It only took a few more days for the atmosphere in the office to shift, though Claire was the only one who seemed unaware of the small changes happening around her. The employees had started noticing how often the CEO appeared on the same floor as the junior staff, particularly near the cafeteria or the break room. Ethan Carter was a man known for living in boardrooms and conference calls, not for lingering near vending machines or walking the long route just to pass by a certain cubicle. Yet that was exactly what he was doing, and everyone saw it. But Claire, focused and grounded as always, continued her work without realizing she was becoming the center of quiet curiosity. That afternoon, as the clock struck noon, Claire gathered her things and headed to the cafeteria. She walked with a sense of calm, unaware that Ethan was already seated at their usual spot, waiting for her. He had been restless all morning, checking the time every few minutes. When Claire finally walked in, his entire expression softened. She approached with her lunchbox in hand, smiling gently when she saw him. "You are early today," she said as she took her seat. "I guess I just did not want to miss lunch with you," Ethan admitted, his voice warm. Claire felt a soft flutter in her chest, but she kept her expression steady. "Well, I am here now," she replied. She opened her lunchbox, revealing a neatly packed meal of roasted vegetables, grilled chicken, and a small slice of homemade bread. Ethan watched with a fondness he had not yet dared to name. She noticed him staring and raised an eyebrow. "What?" she asked playfully. "Nothing," Ethan said with a smile. "I just like how you always bring food from home. It feels sincere." Claire laughed lightly. "It is just food, Ethan. You talk about it like it is something magical." "Maybe it is," he said quietly, but he said it in a way that made Claire pause for a moment longer than usual. As they started eating, Ethan's curiosity resurfaced. He leaned forward. "Can I ask you something? Why do you always bring homemade lunches? Do you like cooking that much?" Claire hesitated, her hands slowing over her meal. For the first time, she seemed unsure whether to answer. Ethan immediately noticed her shift. "If it is too personal, you do not have to tell me," he said gently. Claire glanced down for a moment before speaking softly. "It is not that I do not want to tell you. No one ever asked before." Ethan's heart tightened at the vulnerability in her voice. "I want to know," he said sincerely. Claire nodded slowly, gathering her thoughts. "My mom loved cooking. She believed that food made with your own hands had a different kind of warmth. When she got sick, I started cooking for her every day. It became our routine. After she passed away, it just felt wrong to stop." Ethan felt a deep ache inside him as he listened. He could see the sadness lingering behind her steady expression, a sadness she carried quietly, without expecting sympathy. "I am sorry, Claire," he said softly. "I had no idea." Claire gently shook her head. "It happened years ago. I am okay. But bringing lunch from home, it reminds me of her. It makes me feel grounded." Ethan nodded, his respect for her growing even deeper. "That makes sense," he said quietly. "I admire that." Before she could respond, two employees walked past their table, whispering to each other not so quietly. "He is always with her lately," one murmured. "Do you think something is going on?" Claire stiffened, her eyes lowering. She hated gossip more than anything. Ethan's jaw tightened, irritation flickering across his expression. "Ignore them," he said firmly. "They do not know what they are talking about." Claire forced a small smile, but she did not look entirely convinced. "It is fine," she said softly. "People will always talk." Ethan leaned forward, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Let them talk. I do not care. I am here because I want to be." Claire met his eyes slowly, and something inside her melted just a little. She did not respond, but Ethan could see it, the way her resistance was softening day by day. After lunch, they walked back toward the elevators. As they approached, Claire suddenly stopped. "Ethan," she said gently, "I need to ask you something." "Anything," he replied. Claire looked him directly in the eyes, searching for something real, something undeniable. "Why me?" Ethan blinked. "What do you mean? You could spend your time with anyone. People with your status usually surround themselves with others like them. So why are you choosing to spend your time with someone like me?" Ethan took a slow breath. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the sincerity in his voice. "Because you are real, Claire. Because you are not pretending. Because being around you makes me feel more like myself than anyone else ever has." Claire's breath caught. She was not expecting that answer. Ethan continued, his voice soft but unwavering. "And because, when I sit with you, I am not a CEO. I am just Ethan." Claire's lips parted slightly in surprise, her heart thudding in her chest. She said nothing for several long seconds, her eyes glimmering with emotion. Then she whispered, "I do not know what to do with that." Ethan gave her a gentle smile. "You do not have to do anything. Not yet. Just let me stay close to you. That is all I ask for now." Claire nodded slowly, her defenses weakening even more, her heart beginning to open in a way she had never allowed before. And for the first time, she walked toward the elevator with him at her side, not as her boss, but as someone she was beginning to let into her guarded world. It had been a few weeks since Claire and Ethan made their unspoken agreement to take things slow, and though their interactions had remained casual on the surface, a palpable shift had occurred between them. Ethan had made it a point to keep their meetings lighthearted, always bringing Claire her favorite coffee from the cafe downstairs, always showing up at lunchtime with a casual smile and no pressure. But underneath it all, something had quietly changed. Ethan found himself looking for excuses to be near her. He no longer felt the weight of his title when they shared a meal or a conversation. And Claire, though still cautious, found herself looking forward to their time together. Every laugh, every shared story, made her feel something she had long kept buried: hope. But the whispers in the office hadn't stopped. Claire couldn't shake the feeling that people were noticing. One afternoon, as she was walking into the cafeteria, she overheard two employees chatting by the coffee machine. "Did you see them today? He's always with her now. Is that normal?" One whispered. "I heard they were getting pretty close," the other replied. "But we'll see how long that lasts. It's not exactly a good idea to mix business with personal stuff, right?" Claire's stomach churned at the words. She didn't want to be part of some office gossip. She hated that people were talking about her and Ethan. It made her feel exposed in a way she wasn't used to. But she didn't want to bring it up with him. She wasn't ready for that conversation. It wasn't until later that day when they were sitting together in their usual spot that Ethan noticed she seemed distant. He had just made a joke about one of the company's ridiculous reports, but Claire wasn't laughing. He studied her carefully for a moment before speaking. "Claire, what's going on? You've been quiet all afternoon." Claire looked at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Finally, she sighed. "It's nothing," she said, shaking her head. "Just some things going on in my head." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You know you can talk to me, right? If something's bothering you." Claire hesitated. She wanted to be open with him, wanted to share what was on her mind, but the thought of bringing up the office rumors made her anxious. "It's just the gossip. People are noticing us. I don't want to make things weird for you, or for me," she admitted quietly. Ethan's face softened, and he leaned forward, reaching across the table to take her hand in his. "Don't worry about what they think," he said firmly. "You and I are the ones who matter. Let them talk. They'll always talk, no matter what we do. But I'm not going to hide from it, and neither should you." Claire met his eyes, her heart skipping a beat. "It's not that simple, Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've worked so hard to keep my personal life separate from everything. I don't want to jeopardize my job or my reputation just because people are making assumptions." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "I get it. I do. But I can't pretend I don't care about you. And if that makes things uncomfortable for anyone else, then that's on them, not us." Claire felt the warmth of his hand in hers, and for the first time, she realized that she had been holding herself back, not just from him, but from fully embracing what they had. "I'm scared, Ethan," she said softly. "I don't want to lose this, whatever this is, because of what other people think." Ethan smiled, a gentle and reassuring smile. "We'll figure it out together, Claire. One step at a time. I'm not asking you to make any huge decisions right now, but I want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Claire exhaled slowly, the tension in her chest easing for the first time in days. She wasn't sure what the future held, but sitting across from Ethan, hearing those words, made her feel like maybe she could finally let go of her fears, just a little. Over the next few days, Claire did her best to push the gossip out of her mind. She focused on her work, but she couldn't help but notice that Ethan seemed more present than ever. He was always around, always checking in, always offering her support. And the more time she spent with him, the more she realized that she was falling for him, hard. She had tried to ignore it, to keep things professional, but there was no denying what she felt. But that same realization scared her. What if her feelings for him got in the way of her career? What if this wasn't just a harmless connection? What if she was setting herself up for heartbreak? And then, one afternoon, everything changed. It was a busy day at the office. Claire was wrapped up in her work, trying to meet a deadline, when she received an unexpected email. It was from the Human Resources Department. It was a formal invitation to attend an office meeting about appropriate workplace relationships. Claire's heart sank. She knew exactly what it was about. The rumors had reached HR, and now she was being called in. Her first instinct was to ignore it, to avoid the meeting altogether, but she knew that wasn't an option. She couldn't run from this anymore. She had to face the consequences of what was happening between her and Ethan. The meeting was scheduled for the next morning. Claire barely slept that night, her mind racing with all the possible outcomes. She knew that HR was just doing its job, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of the end. The next day, she walked into the HR office, her heart pounding in her chest. Ethan was already there, waiting for her. She met his eyes, and for a moment, everything else faded away. He gave her a reassuring nod, and she took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. It had been an excruciating few hours since Claire and Ethan had walked into the Human Resources office, the weight of the situation heavier with every passing minute. They had both been called in, separately, to discuss the rumors that had been circulating in the office about their growing relationship. Claire had spent the night before dreading this moment, unable to sleep as her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. What if this was the end of her career? What if everything she had worked for came crashing down because of a simple lunch? What if Ethan's position as her boss became an insurmountable barrier? But Ethan had been nothing but supportive. He assured her that he would be there for her no matter what, and that together, they would handle whatever came next. When they finally walked into the HR office, it was more formal than either of them had expected. The room was clean, well-lit, and filled with a sense of professionalism that immediately put Claire on edge. The HR representative, a middle-aged woman named Laura, was sitting at a desk, her posture straight, her face impassive. She gestured for them to sit. "Thank you for coming in," Laura said in a calm, measured tone. "We're here to discuss the current situation regarding your relationship. It has come to our attention that there has been some speculation among your colleagues about the nature of your personal connection." Claire's stomach twisted at the words, but she kept her gaze steady. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she wasn't about to let the situation get the best of her. Ethan sat beside her, his presence a silent reassurance, though he looked just as tense. "I want to start by making it clear," Laura continued, "that the company's policies are designed to ensure a professional and respectful work environment for everyone. That includes ensuring that personal relationships do not interfere with the workplace dynamics or the company's objectives." Claire felt the weight of the words press on her chest. She had always valued professionalism, and the thought of her relationship with Ethan disrupting her work made her feel guilty. "I understand," Claire replied quietly, her voice steady despite the nerves. "We're not trying to make things difficult. We're just figuring things out." Laura nodded, taking notes as Claire spoke. "I appreciate your honesty," she said, looking between Claire and Ethan. "The concern here is not the relationship itself, but the perception it might create among your colleagues. There are clear conflicts of interest when it comes to workplace relationships, especially when one person is in a supervisory role." Ethan shifted in his seat. He had been quiet until now, but he could feel the tension rising. He didn't like how the conversation was unfolding, but he had to remain calm. "I understand the concerns," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "But I don't want you to think that our personal connection has affected our work or the way we treat others. We've kept things professional in the office, and I don't intend to let this interfere with my responsibilities." Laura looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That's what we need to hear. But I have to make it clear, this needs to be handled with care. Any appearance of favoritism or bias, whether real or perceived, could result in serious consequences for both of you." Claire's heart skipped a beat. The weight of her position in the company was suddenly so much more apparent. She had worked so hard to get to where she was, and the thought of losing everything because of her feelings for Ethan felt overwhelming. Ethan seemed to sense her discomfort, and he reached over, gently placing his hand on hers. "We understand," he said softly, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "We'll take whatever steps are necessary to ensure that we follow the company's guidelines." Laura regarded them both carefully, then stood and walked over to a filing cabinet. She pulled out a folder and handed it to Claire. "This is a reminder of the company's policy on workplace relationships," she said. Please review it and ensure you both understand the expectations. If you choose to continue this relationship, you will need to disclose it to HR officially. That way, we can avoid any further misunderstandings. Claire took the folder, her fingers brushing against Ethan's as she did. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't going to be easy. Ethan and Claire both stood to leave, and as they walked out of the HR office, Claire felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. The meeting had been difficult, but at least it was over. The tension between them hadn't broken, but it had shifted into something else, an understanding. As they walked down the hallway, Claire spoke, her voice quieter now. "What do we do now?" she asked, her eyes searching Ethan's. Ethan turned to her, his expression soft but resolute. "We do what we have to," he said gently. "We keep working, keep doing our jobs, and we make sure we're respecting the rules. If we want to be together, we'll do it the right way." Claire nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of the situation. But there was a part of her that felt a little lighter, too. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be without complications. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, it was worth it. She and Ethan didn't have all the answers. They didn't even know where this was going. But they had each other, and that was enough, for now. It had been a few weeks since the HR meeting, and while things had seemed to settle back into a normal rhythm at work, Claire couldn't shake the lingering tension. Ethan had kept his word. He was always respectful, always professional, but she couldn't ignore the fact that the situation between them had changed. The whispers in the office had quieted for the most part, but the unspoken feelings between her and Ethan were becoming harder to ignore. They had both agreed to take things slow, to keep their relationship under wraps for the time being, but every glance, every brief touch, when they were alone felt like a declaration. Claire had tried to convince herself that she was still in control, that she could keep things professional while maintaining this secret bond with Ethan. But it was becoming more difficult with each passing day. Ethan, too, felt the weight of the situation. He had always prided himself on being in control, on being the one who made the decisions. But now, as he watched Claire from across the room, as he found himself thinking about her constantly, he realized how out of control he had become. There was no denying it. He was falling for her. And the more he tried to suppress it, the more it seemed to grow. One afternoon, after a particularly long meeting, Ethan found himself waiting for Claire in the cafeteria, his heart beating faster than usual. He had made a decision. He couldn't wait any longer. He had to be honest with her, honest about his feelings, honest about what he wanted. When Claire walked in, he stood up to greet her, his nerves on edge. She smiled at him, but there was something different in her expression today. Ethan could tell she was tense, her smile a little forced. "Hey," she said, taking a seat across from him. "Long meeting today." Ethan nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He took a deep breath before speaking, trying to steady his nerves. "Claire," he said, his voice low, "we need to talk." Claire looked at him, her brow furrowed with concern. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice cautious. Ethan hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. "Nothing's wrong," he said finally. "But we've been dancing around this for a while now, and I can't keep pretending that this, us, is just something casual. I care about you, Claire. A lot." Claire's heart skipped a beat. She had known this was coming, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel so much more real. She swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. "Ethan," she started, but her voice trailed off. "I care about you too," she said quietly, looking down at her hands. Ethan reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. "Then why are we holding back?" he asked softly. "Why are we pretending like there's nothing here?" Claire pulled her hand back, her mind racing. "Because it's complicated," she said, her voice tight. "We can't just ignore the fact that you're my boss, Ethan. I've worked so hard to get where I am. I can't risk losing everything over a relationship that might not even work." Ethan felt a pang in his chest. He knew she was right, but he also knew that what they had wasn't just some fling. It was something deeper, something he couldn't walk away from. "I understand your fears," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "But I'm not asking you to give up your career. I'm not asking you to throw everything away for me. All I'm asking is that we stop pretending like we don't have feelings for each other." Claire shook her head, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I'm scared, Ethan," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. What if this doesn't work out? What if we ruin everything? Our jobs, our careers, everything we've worked for. Ethan reached for her hand again, his grip steady this time. I'm scared too, he said quietly. But I believe in us. I believe we can make this work if we're both willing to try. Claire looked at him for a long moment, her heart beating in her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that they could figure this out together. But the fear still lingered. Fear of the consequences, fear of losing everything. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. I don't know what this is yet, Ethan. But I'm willing to take that first step with you. We'll figure it out together. Ethan smiled, a wave of relief washing over him. That's all I'm asking for, he said softly. One step at a time. As they sat together, the tension between them began to dissolve, replaced by a sense of calm. For the first time in weeks, Claire felt like she could breathe again. The weight of the situation hadn't disappeared, but it felt manageable now. They were in this together, and that was enough, for now. Over the next few weeks, they carefully navigated their relationship, always mindful of the boundaries they had set. They continued to keep their feelings private, though the office atmosphere had shifted slightly. People were still whispering, but it no longer mattered to Claire. She had made her choice, and she wasn't going to let anyone else's opinion dictate her happiness. Ethan, too, felt the shift. He knew the risks of their relationship, but he also knew that he couldn't let fear hold him back. With each passing day, his feelings for Claire deepened, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized that he wanted to be with her. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Ethan felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. And maybe, just maybe, Claire felt the same way. It had been a few weeks since Claire and Ethan made their decision to take things slow, and though they had agreed to keep their relationship discreet for the time being, the weight of their feelings had become harder to ignore. Claire, despite her initial reluctance, was beginning to embrace the possibility of what lay ahead. She still had her doubts, of course. The fear of losing everything, her job, her reputation, was always in the back of her mind. But as the days passed, she couldn't help but feel a sense of peace whenever she was with Ethan. Ethan, on the other hand, had tried to push his feelings aside, focusing on his work and giving Claire space to figure things out. But it was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore the undeniable connection between them. Every time they spoke, every time their hands brushed against each other, he felt his heart race. He had tried to maintain control, but now, he couldn't deny it. He was falling for her. The moments they shared, whether it was a quick lunch in the cafeteria or a casual conversation in the hallway, were enough to make Ethan realize how deeply he cared for her. And yet, despite this growing affection, the reality of their situation hung over them like a shadow. Neither of them knew how this would play out. Claire, still hesitant to fully give in to her feelings, struggled with the idea of mixing business with pleasure. She had always prided herself on being professional, and the thought of jeopardizing her career for something as uncertain as love made her anxious. Ethan understood her fears, but the more time they spent together, the more he felt like they were meant to be. He wasn't about to let fear stand in the way of something that felt so real. One afternoon, after a long meeting, Ethan found himself in his office, staring out the window. He was supposed to be working, but his mind kept drifting back to Claire. He hadn't seen her all day, and a strange sense of longing filled him. He wanted to see her, to be close to her. He couldn't help it anymore. He had to talk to her. He grabbed his jacket and headed out of his office, making his way to the elevator. He was determined to find her, to finally have that conversation they both needed to have. When he reached the cafeteria, he spotted Claire sitting alone at a table, engrossed in a report. Her lunchbox was open, and she was absent-mindedly eating, not noticing him approaching. He smiled to himself, appreciating the quiet moment before she noticed his presence. As he walked up to her, Claire looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. "Ethan," she said, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "What are you doing here?" "I thought I'd join you for lunch," Ethan said, taking a seat across from her. "If that's okay with you." Claire hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Of course," she said, a little surprised by his sudden appearance. "I wasn't expecting you." Ethan smiled warmly, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "I wasn't expecting to be here either," he admitted, "but I realized that I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to keep wondering where this is going." Claire's heart skipped a beat at his words. She knew exactly what he meant. She had been avoiding this conversation for weeks, unsure of how to respond, afraid of what it would mean. But now, sitting across from him, she realized that maybe it was time to stop running from it. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly, "I've been thinking about this too. About us. And I can't keep pretending like I don't feel anything." Ethan's eyes lit up, and for a moment, the tension between them melted away. "So, what do we do now?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with anticipation. Claire looked at him, her heart racing. "I don't know," she said, her gaze dropping to her lunchbox. "I want to believe in this, Ethan. I really do. But I'm scared. I've worked so hard to get to where I am, and I don't want to lose it all over something that's uncertain." Ethan reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. "I understand your fear," he said, his voice low and soothing. "I'm scared too, but I don't want to let fear stop us from trying. We can take it one step at a time, together." Claire's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure what to say. She wanted to believe him, to trust him, but there was so much at stake. She had worked so hard for everything she had, and the thought of risking it all for something that felt so fragile made her anxious. But then she looked into his eyes, and, for the first time, she felt a sense of peace. Maybe they could figure this out. Maybe it didn't have to be perfect right away. "One step at a time," she repeated softly, squeezing his hand. Ethan smiled, his heart lifting. "That's all I'm asking for," he said. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling between them. But despite the uncertainty, something had shifted. They were no longer holding back. They weren't sure what the future held, but they were willing to face it together. Later that afternoon, as they left the cafeteria, Ethan and Claire walked side by side, the air between them charged with possibility. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, they both felt ready to face it. Together. It had been several weeks since Claire and Ethan made the decision to face their growing feelings for each other, and while things seemed to be going smoothly, there were still moments of tension and uncertainty. They had agreed to take things slow, to keep their relationship under wraps as best as they could, but every day it felt more and more difficult to pretend like nothing had changed. Ethan was becoming increasingly open about his feelings for Claire, his gestures more tender, his smiles more genuine. Claire, too, found herself falling deeper, though she still held on to her fears of what could happen if this went public. The office environment had been largely calm, and the gossip had mostly died down after the HR meeting, but Claire couldn't help but notice the occasional glance, the occasional whisper when she and Ethan were in the same room. It made her feel exposed in a way she wasn't used to, but at the same time, she found herself caring less about it. One Friday afternoon, as they both wrapped up their work, Ethan suggested they grab dinner. It had become a routine for them to spend time together after work, but tonight felt different. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, as if they both knew they were on the verge of something important. Claire hesitated for a moment, her mind still racing with the same worries that had been plaguing her for weeks, but then she nodded. "Yeah, let's do it." Ethan smiled, his heart lifting at her response. "Great. I know a place. Downtown. It's quiet. Perfect for a night like this." As they walked to the car, Claire's thoughts were a whirlwind. She knew they had reached a turning point. The decision to acknowledge their relationship was no longer something they could ignore, no longer something they could keep hidden. But the idea of making it public, of facing the judgment that might come with it, still made her nervous. Ethan could sense her unease, but he didn't press her. He simply reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "We don't have to talk about anything tonight if you're not ready," he said, his voice soft but steady. "We can just enjoy the evening." Claire looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. He always knew how to put her at ease. "I appreciate that," she said quietly. "But I think we need to talk. We can't keep pretending like everything is fine when it's not." Ethan nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. They arrived at the restaurant, a cozy, intimate spot that had a romantic charm to it. As they settled into their booth, Claire took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. Ethan ordered a bottle of wine, something light and refreshing, as they both settled into the quiet ambience. The moment the wine arrived, Claire found herself reaching for it, needing something to calm her racing thoughts. She took a sip, the cool liquid helping to ground her for a moment. "I've been thinking about us a lot," she said, breaking the silence. "About what this means, about what we're doing." Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her face, his expression soft. I've been thinking about it too, he said quietly. I don't want you to feel pressured, Claire. I don't want to make you feel like you have to decide anything right away. We've come this far, and I'm willing to go at your pace. Claire looked at him, the sincerity in his eyes making her heart ache. She had always prided herself on being independent, on doing everything on her own terms. But with Ethan, it was different. She couldn't deny how much she cared for him, how much she wanted to be with him, but the risks were still real. I don't want to lose what we have, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I don't want to risk everything either. I've worked so hard to build my career, and I don't want it to all come crashing down. Ethan reached across the table, his hand gently covering hers. I understand, he said softly. I do. But I think we both know that we can't keep living in fear of what might happen. I don't want to hide anymore, Claire. Not from you, and not from anyone else. Claire felt a lump in her throat as she processed his words. She knew he was right. Hiding from their feelings, from the truth of their connection, was no longer an option. She could keep pretending, keep pushing her emotions aside, but in the end, it would only make things harder. What if it doesn't work out? She asked, the fear rising in her chest again. What if everything falls apart? Ethan smiled gently, his thumb brushing over her hand in a comforting motion. We don't know what will happen, Claire, but we can't live our lives waiting for the worst. We can't let fear dictate our choices. All I know is that I want to try with you, whatever that looks like. Claire looked at him, the uncertainty still lingering but now tempered with something else. Hope. She had spent so long guarding her heart, afraid to let anyone in, especially someone like Ethan. But now, sitting across from him, she realized that maybe it was time to take that step. Maybe it was time to trust him, to trust them. Okay, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Let's do it. Let's take that step. Together. Ethan's face lit up, a mixture of relief and happiness in his expression. He reached across the table, pulling her hand toward him. Together, he agreed softly. As they shared a quiet, intimate dinner, the world outside seemed to fade away. They were no longer two people trying to navigate an impossible situation. They were simply two people who had found something real, something worth fighting for. They didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, they both felt ready to face it, together. It had been a few weeks since Claire and Ethan decided to take the leap and face their feelings head-on. They had agreed to keep things low-key, to take their time and let things develop naturally. The pressure of hiding their relationship had slowly eased, but the uncertainty of the future still loomed over them. Despite their growing connection, Claire was still cautious, especially when it came to work. She had seen how quickly personal relationships could turn complicated, and she wasn't sure if it was worth the risk. Ethan, on the other hand, was determined to make it work. He had built his entire life around control, his company, his success, his carefully constructed world. But with Claire, he felt something that he couldn't ignore, and for the first time, he wasn't willing to let it slip away. One morning, after a particularly long week of meetings and deadlines, Ethan invited Claire to lunch at a quiet cafe he had been to once before. It was a place far from the prying eyes of their colleagues, a place where they could relax without the weight of the office atmosphere. As they sat down at their table, Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady. We need to talk. Claire looked at him, a little taken aback. About what? She asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Ethan took a deep breath, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. About us. About what comes next. Claire felt her stomach tighten. She had known this conversation was coming, but hearing Ethan say it out loud made everything feel more real. She had been avoiding it, hoping that somehow, things would settle down on their own. But she couldn't ignore it anymore. I've been thinking about this too, she said quietly. About us. And I'm not sure where we're headed. Ethan smiled gently, trying to ease her tension. We don't need to have everything figured out right away, Claire. But I need to know, do you see a future with me? Claire looked down at her hands, her mind racing. She wanted to say yes, wanted to believe that they could build something together. But the fear of what it might cost her, the possibility of things going wrong, made her hesitate. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to believe that we can make it work, but I'm scared of what might happen. I've worked so hard for my career, and I don't want to lose it over something like this. Ethan reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. I understand. I know how much your career means to you. And I would never ask you to give that up. But I'm asking you to take a chance on us. On me. Claire looked up, her eyes meeting his, and for a moment, she saw nothing but sincerity in his gaze. She felt her heart soften. It's not that I don't care about you, Ethan. I do. I don't know if I can risk everything for something that might not work out. Ethan squeezed her hand, his voice steady. I'm not asking you to risk everything. I'm asking you to trust me. To take it one step at a time, just like we've been doing. I know this isn't easy, but I want to try. I'm willing to face whatever comes our way, as long as we're in it together. Claire felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had spent so much time building walls around her heart, protecting herself from the possibility of hurt. But with Ethan, the walls were starting to crumble. Maybe it was time to take that step. Maybe it was time to trust him, and trust herself. Okay, she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. Let's take that step. Together. Ethan smiled, a sense of relief flooding over him. Together, he repeated, his eyes warm. As they finished their lunch, the weight that had been hanging between them seemed to lift, if only a little. The uncertainty hadn't disappeared, but it felt more manageable now. They didn't have all the answers, but they were willing to find them together. The next few days passed in a quiet, tentative harmony. Claire and Ethan continued their routine, but there was a new sense of ease between them. They were no longer hiding their feelings, but they weren't quite ready to go public either. They kept their relationship private, just as they had agreed. But the connection between them was undeniable, and with each passing day, it felt more natural. At work, they maintained their professionalism, though there were moments when their eyes would meet across the room, and the unspoken understanding between them was enough to make their hearts race. One evening, as they walked to their cars after another long day, Ethan stopped and turned to Claire, his expression serious. There's something I want to talk to you about, he said. Claire looked at him, a little concerned. What is it? I know. We've been taking things slow, he began. But I want to make sure we're on the same page. I don't want you to feel like I'm pushing you into anything. I just need to know if you're ready for the next step. I'm in this, Claire, and I want you to be in this with me. Claire felt a surge of emotion. It was one thing to say she was ready to take things slow, but hearing Ethan say he was in this for the long haul made her realize just how much he meant to her. She had been scared of what it could cost her, but maybe she was finally ready to face the truth, that she didn't want to live without him. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady now, a soft smile tugging at her lips. Let's do this. Ethan's face lit up, and for the first time in weeks, Claire felt a sense of certainty settle within her. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew one thing for sure. They were ready to face it together. It had been a few months since Claire and Ethan had decided to give their relationship a real chance, and while the journey hadn't been without its bumps, they were beginning to find a rhythm. The initial uncertainty about mixing business with pleasure had faded somewhat, replaced with a quiet understanding that they were both in this for the long haul. The whispers at work had quieted, and though they were still cautious, both of them felt a sense of peace they hadn't expected. They had managed to keep things low-key, with only a handful of people knowing about their connection, and for the most part, their colleagues had respected their privacy. But as their feelings for each other deepened, Claire couldn't help but wonder what would happen when their secret could no longer be kept. She had always been the type to keep her personal life private, but with Ethan, it felt different. There was something undeniable about what they shared, something that made her heart race whenever he smiled at her or brushed his fingers against hers. And yet, she was still afraid of the consequences of letting their relationship become known. Ethan, too, had his own fears. He knew that if their relationship became public, it could change everything. He had always worked hard to maintain control, to keep his professional life separate from his personal one, but now, with Claire, he couldn't imagine his life without her. The thought of being without her was unbearable, but he understood her fears. They had spent months carefully navigating this territory, afraid of making the wrong move, but Ethan felt it in his bones. He was ready to take the next step. That evening, after a long day of meetings, Ethan asked Claire to join him for dinner. This time, it wasn't just another casual outing. It was a step towards something more, something that would either solidify their relationship or force them to confront the truth of what they were building. When Claire arrived at the restaurant, Ethan was already there, waiting for her with a soft smile on his face. As she sat down across from him, she felt the familiar flutter in her chest. They had become so comfortable together, so attuned to each other's moods. And yet, the weight of their unspoken words hung heavily between them. Ethan didn't waste any time. "Claire," he said softly, his voice serious but warm. "I've been thinking a lot about where we're headed. About what we're doing." Claire looked at him, her heart racing in her chest. She had a pretty good idea of what was coming, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel more real. "I think I know what you're going to say," she said, her voice quieter than usual. Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I know you're scared, and I get it. I really do. But I can't keep pretending like this is just something casual. I want you, Claire. I want us." Claire felt her breath catch in her throat. She had been holding on to her doubts for so long, afraid of taking that next step, but hearing Ethan's words made her realize how much she wanted this, too. She had been scared of losing control, but she had already lost it the moment she let herself care about him. "I want us too," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I'm scared. I'm scared of everything changing, of what people might think, of what it could do to my career." Ethan's thumb gently stroked her hand, his eyes locked onto hers with a fierce intensity. "You don't have to be afraid of losing everything," he said softly. "I'm not asking you to give up anything, Claire. I'm asking you to take a chance on us. To be with me, without the fear of what other people think." Claire met his gaze, her mind swirling with conflicting emotions. She had spent so long building her career, keeping her focus on her goals, and now here she was, willing to risk it all for something that felt so uncertain. But when she looked at Ethan, she saw something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. "I've never felt this way before," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I'm terrified of what could happen if we take this step. But I don't want to keep holding back. I don't want to live my life wondering what could have been." Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with emotion. "We don't know what's going to happen, Claire. But I know one thing for sure. I don't want to spend another day without you. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Claire felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had been so focused on her fears that she had forgotten to trust herself. She had forgotten to trust the one thing that had brought them together in the first place, the connection between them. "Okay," she said, her voice steady now. "Let's do it. Together." Ethan's smile widened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Claire felt like everything was falling into place. They didn't have all the answers, and they didn't know what the future held, but they were ready to take that next step. As they sat there, their hands intertwined, they both realized that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were no longer afraid of what it might bring. Together, they would face whatever came their way, one step at a time. It had been a few weeks since Claire and Ethan decided to make their relationship official, and although they had taken the necessary steps to keep things low-key, the reality of their decision was starting to sink in. Both of them were nervous, knowing that the moment they went public, things could change dramatically, but they also knew that they couldn't keep hiding forever. Ethan had never felt so certain about anything in his life. He had spent years building his company, crafting his success, and controlling every aspect of his life. But Claire had brought something unexpected into his world, something real, something he couldn't ignore. And with every passing day, his feelings for her only grew stronger. Claire, on the other hand, was struggling. She had always been the independent one, the one who kept her personal life private and focused on her career. She had worked so hard to get where she was, and the thought of risking everything for a relationship made her hesitant. But every time she was with Ethan, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. She couldn't deny that she cared about him, but the fear of what might happen if they went public was overwhelming. One evening, after another long day at work, Ethan suggested they take a walk. Claire had been stressed about an upcoming presentation, and Ethan thought the fresh air would do them both good. As they walked side by side, the cool breeze ruffling her hair, Claire felt a sense of calm she hadn't experienced in a while. Ethan had a way of making her feel safe, of easing her worries just by being there. "You've been quiet lately," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "What's on your mind?" Claire hesitated for a moment, not sure if she was ready to talk about everything that had been weighing on her. But she trusted him, more than she had trusted anyone in a long time. "I'm just worried," she admitted, her voice soft. "Worried about what happens next. We've been careful, but I feel like we can't keep hiding forever." Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "I know," he said, his voice steady. But we've talked about this. We don't have to rush. We'll go at our own pace, and when the time is right, we'll make the decision that's best for us. Claire nodded, but the anxiety still lingered. I don't want to lose everything, Ethan, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I've worked so hard for my career, and I can't just throw it away because of something I don't fully understand yet. Ethan gently cupped her face with his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. You won't lose everything, he said softly. I'll be here with you, every step of the way. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Claire felt a lump form in her throat, the weight of his words sinking in. She had never expected to find someone like Ethan, someone who cared about her as much as he did. But at the same time, she couldn't shake the fear of what it might cost her. What if it all falls apart? She whispered. What if we lose everything because we couldn't make it work? Ethan shook his head, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. We don't know what will happen, he said gently. But I do know this, we're stronger together. And no matter what, I'm not letting you go. The sincerity in his eyes left Claire speechless. She had always kept people at arm's length, afraid of getting hurt, of losing herself in a relationship. But with Ethan, it felt different. She wasn't sure where this path would lead, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was willing to take the risk. I want to try, she said softly, her voice filled with determination. I want to take that chance with you, Ethan. His face lit up, and in that moment, all the doubts and fears that had been clouding Claire's mind seemed to fade away. They didn't have all the answers, but they were ready to take the next step together. As they continued their walk, hand in hand, the world around them seemed to disappear. For the first time, Claire wasn't afraid of the unknown. She was ready to face it with Ethan by her side. The next day, Claire and Ethan made the decision to be open about their relationship. They knew it wouldn't be easy, and they were prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. But they also knew that they were no longer willing to hide in the shadows. Their love was real, and it was time to face the world with that truth. When they finally shared the news with their colleagues, the reactions were mixed. Some were supportive, others skeptical. But Ethan and Claire remained unwavering in their commitment to each other, and in the end, it didn't matter what anyone else thought. What mattered was that they were in this together, and no matter the obstacles, they were ready to face whatever came their way. As the days passed, their relationship continued to grow stronger. They faced challenges, but they faced them together. And with each passing day, Claire realized that the fear she had once felt was slowly being replaced by something else, hope. She had taken a chance on love, and it had been worth it. With Ethan by her side, she knew that whatever the future held, they could handle it together. It had been a few weeks since Claire and Ethan made the decision to go public with their relationship, and while things seemed to be progressing well, there were still challenges. They had prepared for some reactions, but the reality of navigating their personal connection in the workplace was proving to be more complicated than they had anticipated. The whispers, though quieter than before, still lingered, and there was a growing tension in the air whenever they were in the same room. It wasn't that their colleagues were openly hostile, but the shift in dynamics was impossible to ignore. People were watching, analyzing every interaction, wondering how far their relationship would go. Claire, ever the professional, kept her focus on her work, determined to prove that her personal life wouldn't interfere with her career. She had worked too hard to get to this point to let anything jeopardize it. But at times, the pressure of balancing both worlds felt overwhelming. Ethan, for his part, was doing his best to be supportive. He respected Claire's need for privacy and space, but it wasn't always easy. He hated seeing her tense up when the gossip started, and he hated that their relationship had to be something they had to hide. But he also understood the importance of not rushing things, of letting their bond develop naturally, without forcing it to be anything it wasn't. One evening, after work, they decided to meet at a quiet cafe outside of the city. Ethan had been noticing how distant Claire had been in the past few days, and he could tell she was struggling. They sat in a corner booth, the dim light casting soft shadows across their faces. Claire stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, not meeting Ethan's eyes. "You've been quiet lately," Ethan said softly, his voice laced with concern. Claire hesitated, then looked up at him, her eyes tired. "I'm just trying to figure things out," she admitted. "This whole thing, it's harder than I thought." Ethan nodded, his expression serious. "I know it's been tough, but we knew it wouldn't be easy, and I'm not saying it's going to." be smooth sailing from here on out. But I think we've made it this far because we're both willing to fight for what we have. Claire smiled faintly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I don't want to lose everything, she said quietly. I've worked so hard for my career, for everything I've built. I can't risk it all for something that might not work out. Ethan reached across the table, gently placing his hand on hers. You're not going to lose everything, Claire. Not because of me. I care about you, and I don't want to make your life harder. But I also know that what we have is real, and it's worth fighting for. Claire felt a lump form in her throat. It wasn't just about the career. It was about letting go, about trusting him, about giving herself permission to feel vulnerable. She had spent so long building walls around her heart, keeping everyone at arm's length. But with Ethan, it felt different. I'm scared, Ethan, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. What if it all falls apart? What if I end up losing everything, including you? Ethan's gaze softened. We can't predict the future, Claire, but we can choose to move forward together. And that's all I'm asking for. Claire looked down at their hands, feeling the weight of the decision they were facing. She wanted to believe in them, wanted to believe in their connection, but the fear was still there, lurking in the back of her mind. I'm not asking you to throw everything away, Ethan continued, his voice steady. I'm asking you to trust me, to trust us. We don't have to have all the answers right now, but we can take it one step at a time. Claire looked up at him, her eyes searching his. One step at a time, she repeated softly, as if the words themselves were a comfort. Ethan smiled, a quiet sense of relief washing over him. Exactly. One step at a time. The conversation shifted after that, the tension between them slowly melting away. They didn't need to solve everything in one night, but simply acknowledging their fears, sharing their concerns, felt like a weight lifted off their shoulders. Over the next few weeks, they found a new balance. Claire was still cautious, still hesitant to fully let go of her fears, but with each passing day, she allowed herself to trust Ethan more. She started to see how much he cared for her, how his actions spoke louder than his words. Ethan, for his part, did everything he could to show her that she didn't have to be afraid. He was patient with her, never pushing her to move faster than she was comfortable with. They spent more time together, whether it was grabbing lunch, taking walks, or simply sitting in silence, enjoying each other's company. They made a conscious effort to maintain their professionalism at work, keeping their relationships separate from their careers. But the truth was, it wasn't easy. The more they tried to keep it under wraps, the more they realized how hard it was to suppress what was becoming so obvious. It was becoming clear that the more time they spent together, the harder it would be to pretend. But even in the face of that uncertainty, Claire couldn't deny the pull she felt toward Ethan. And as time passed, she realized that the risk, though scary, was worth it. She was ready to take that next step, whatever it may be, because in her heart, she knew Ethan was worth the leap. It had been a few more weeks since Claire and Ethan made the decision to move forward with their relationship, and while they had both grown more comfortable with their choice, they were still faced with challenges. The dynamic at work remained tense, though less obvious now, and the occasional glance or whisper from their colleagues reminded them that they couldn't escape the consequences of their decision. Claire, despite her growing feelings for Ethan, continued to guard herself, constantly weighing the risks and rewards of being in a relationship with her boss. She found herself thinking about it more often. What would it mean for her career, for her future? But the more time she spent with Ethan, the more she realized that the fears she had been holding onto no longer seemed as important as the connection they had built. One day, as they sat together for lunch in the quiet corner of the cafeteria, Claire could sense that Ethan was waiting for her to say something. He hadn't pushed her for an answer, but she could feel the weight of the unspoken question between them. Ethan, she began, her voice tentative, I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us. He looked up from his sandwich, his expression softening. And Claire took a deep breath. And I think I'm ready to take that next step. To stop hiding. Ethan's face lit up with a smile, relief flooding his features. You are, he asked, though it wasn't entirely a question. I am, she said, nodding slowly. I can't keep living in fear of what might happen. I've been so afraid of losing everything, but I realize now that I don't want to lose you. I don't want to miss out on what we could have together. Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. You don't have to be afraid, Claire, he said softly. We'll take it one step at a time. I promise, I'm not going anywhere. The sincerity in his voice made Claire's heart flutter. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't sure where the future would take them, but she knew she was ready to face it with Ethan by her side. Over the next few days, they continued to navigate the complexities of their relationship, being more open about their feelings for each other, though still careful to keep things professional at work. They had agreed not to rush things and to take their time in figuring out what this relationship would look like outside of their private moments together. The idea of making their relationship known to others still made Claire uneasy, but each day, she grew a little more confident in her decision. That afternoon, after work, Ethan suggested they take a trip to a nearby park. It had been a while since they had spent time away from the office, and he thought a little fresh air might help clear their minds. As they walked along the winding paths, the trees above casting dappled shadows on the ground, Claire couldn't help but feel a sense of calm. This was how she imagined life with Ethan, simple, peaceful, and full of promise. "I've been thinking about us a lot," she said as they walked, her voice thoughtful, "and about how we've come this far. We've made it through some tough moments, but it feels like things are starting to settle. But there's still so much uncertainty, you know?" Ethan looked over at her, his expression serious but kind. "I know," he said quietly. "I feel the same way. But I believe in us, Claire. I believe we can make this work, even with all the unknowns." She smiled softly, the warmth of his words reassuring her in ways she hadn't expected. "I want to believe that too," she said, her voice soft. "I want to believe that we can have something real, something that doesn't have to be hidden." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "We can have that," he said firmly. "We don't need to keep hiding who we are or what we mean to each other. It might take time, but we'll get there." Claire nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, she felt like the future wasn't as uncertain as it had seemed. With Ethan by her side, she felt like they could face whatever came next. As they walked in silence for a few moments, Claire's thoughts turned back to their careers. She had spent so many years building her professional life, climbing the ladder, improving herself in a male-dominated field. The thought of losing everything because of a relationship was still something that haunted her, but now, she realized that her career wasn't just her life, it was a part of who she was. She didn't have to choose between one or the other. She could have both, as long as she was true to herself and to Ethan. "I've been thinking about my work too," Claire said, breaking the silence, "and how I can keep moving forward while also being honest about who I am." Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with admiration. "You've always been true to yourself, Claire. I know you're going to make the right decisions for your career and for us. And whatever happens, I'll be here to support you." Claire smiled, feeling the weight of his words settle in her heart. They didn't have all the answers yet, but they were in this together. As they continued their walk, Claire realized that she didn't need to have everything figured out. She just needed to trust herself and Ethan. Together, they could face whatever came next, one step at a time. It had been several weeks since Claire and Ethan had fully committed to each other, and their relationship had grown more serious. They were learning to navigate the complexities of working together and being romantically involved, with a constant balance between their personal and professional lives. While the office environment had grown somewhat more comfortable, there were still moments of tension. Their colleagues continued to watch their every move, but Claire and Ethan had learned to focus on each other, to keep their connection strong despite the external pressures. Yet, the inevitable questions still lingered in the back of Claire's mind. What would happen when they could no longer keep their relationship a secret? She had already taken a significant step by allowing their bond to become public within their close circle of friends and some coworkers, but it was only a matter of time before it became widely known. The fear of judgment, of potential consequences at work, still held her back from embracing the idea of being fully open about their relationship. Ethan, for his part, was more confident. His feelings for Claire were clear, and he had never wavered in his belief that their connection was worth any risk. Still, he understood her hesitation. He respected her need for caution, but every day he spent with her, he grew more certain that they were meant to be together. One evening, as they sat at a quiet corner table at a local restaurant, Ethan reached across the table and gently took Claire's hand in his. They had just shared a delicious dinner, and for the first time in weeks, they were both relaxed, enjoying each other's company without the weight of their usual worries. But Ethan could see that something was still bothering her. "You've been quiet tonight," he said softly. "Is something on your mind?" Claire looked down at their joined hands, her fingers idly tracing the outline of his hand. "I've been thinking about everything," she admitted. "About us, about work, and what it all means. I feel like we're getting to a point where we can't hide anymore. I don't know how much longer we can keep this to ourselves." Ethan squeezed her hand gently, his voice calm and reassuring. "I know it's hard, Claire," he said, "and I know you've been carrying a lot of the weight of this. But I want you to know, I'm ready for whatever comes. I'm not afraid of the consequences. I just want to be with you." Claire met his gaze, her heart swelling with emotion. She had always been someone who prided herself on her independence, on controlling every aspect of her life. But with Ethan, she was learning that sometimes it was okay to let go, to trust someone else with her heart. "I'm scared," she said quietly, her voice shaky. "I'm scared of what could happen if we go public. I've worked so hard for my career, and I don't want to lose it. But at the same time, I don't want to keep living in fear of what others think. I just wish there was an easier way." Ethan smiled softly, his thumb gently brushing over the back of her hand. "There's no easy way, Claire," he said. "But we've already taken the hardest step. We've been honest with each other, and we've made it this far. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. And I know we can handle it." Claire felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. Ethan's words were a comfort, reminding her that they were a team, that they didn't have to face the world alone. She wasn't sure when it had happened, but somewhere along the way, her fear had started to lessen. She was no longer afraid of losing herself in this relationship. Instead, she was learning to embrace it. "I want to believe that," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I want to believe that we can make this work." Ethan's smile widened, and he leaned across the table, his voice soft and earnest. "I believe in us, Claire, and I'm willing to take this journey with you, no matter where it leads." Claire felt a surge of emotion and a sense of clarity wash over her. For the first time in weeks, the uncertainty that had been gnawing at her seemed to fade. Maybe it wasn't about having all the answers, about knowing exactly how things would turn out. Maybe it was about trust, about taking a chance on something real. "Okay," she said, her voice steady now. "Let's do it. Let's face whatever comes next together." Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with happiness and relief. "Together," he repeated softly. Over the next few weeks, Claire and Ethan's relationship continued to deepen. They made the decision to be more open with their colleagues, not hiding, but also being respectful of the professional boundaries that still existed between them. The conversations at work became easier, and while there were still some stares and whispers, the two of them grew stronger in their connection. They were no longer hiding from each other, no longer trying to suppress their feelings. As their bond solidified, the challenges they faced seemed less daunting. They had learned to navigate their fears, to communicate openly, and to support each other through it all. And while there would always be uncertainties ahead, they now faced them with a sense of partnership, knowing that no matter what happened, they had each other. Their relationship was no longer a secret, and in that honesty, they found the freedom to truly be themselves. They were ready to take on whatever came next, together. It had been a few more weeks since Claire and Ethan decided to take the leap and be more open about their relationship. While things had definitely improved between them, the weight of their decision continued to linger. They no longer hid their connection, and though it was still a challenge, they had learned to navigate the awkward moments and sideways glances that came from their colleagues. The whispers had started to die down, and while it wasn't all smooth sailing, the couple had managed to find a balance. They spent more time together outside of work, enjoying simple moments and deepening their bond. But the thought of what lay ahead was still a little daunting. Claire had always prided herself on her career and independence, and although she had grown comfortable with Ethan, the fear of losing herself in the process still held her back at times. Ethan, for his part, continued to support Claire's need for space and time, and never once did he pressure her to move faster than she was ready for. Their mutual respect and patience with one another had solidified their connection, but the external challenges still tested them both. One Friday evening, after a long and taxing week at work, Claire and Ethan decided to take a short weekend getaway. A small cabin in the woods had been Ethan's idea, a place where they could disconnect from the pressures of their everyday lives and focus solely on each other. It had been a while since they had time away from the office and the distractions of daily life, and they both agreed it was exactly what they needed. When they arrived, Claire couldn't help but smile at the peaceful surroundings. The cabin was cozy, nestled in a secluded spot by a lake, surrounded by towering trees and soft, calming sounds of nature. Ethan had thought of everything, from the packed meals to the cozy blankets they would snuggle under at night. As they settled in, Claire felt an unfamiliar sense of ease. There was something about being away from everything that made her feel lighter, less burdened by the weight of the decisions she had been grappling with. As the night approached, they sat on the porch, sipping wine and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The quiet beauty of the moment was a welcome change from the usual hustle and bustle of their lives. "I'm glad we're here," Claire said softly, her eyes reflecting the golden light. "I needed this more than I realized." Ethan nodded, his eyes on her. "I'm glad you're here too." He paused, taking a sip from his glass, his gaze never leaving hers. "I've been thinking a lot about us, Claire. About where we're going." Claire looked at him, her heart racing as she waited for him to continue. She knew this conversation was coming, but hearing it out loud felt different. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady but curious. Ethan took a deep breath. "I know we've been taking things slow, and I respect that. But I also know that I want more with you. I want us to be more than just the people who sneak around trying to keep something hidden. I want to be open about this, Claire. I want to share my life with you, without the fear of what anyone else might think." Claire's heart skipped a beat. She had known this was coming. But the thought of making their relationship fully public, of having everyone at work know about them, still filled her with apprehension. "I know," she said quietly, her voice soft. "I've been thinking about it too. But I don't know if I'm ready to take that step. What if it changes everything? What if people start treating us differently?" Ethan reached over and took her hand in his touch warm and comforting. "We can't let fear dictate our lives, Claire. We've come this far because we've been honest with each other. And I'm not asking you to jump in and go public right away. I just want you to know that I'm ready whenever you are." Claire looked down at their hands, feeling the weight of the moment. She had spent so much of her life protecting herself, keeping everything at a distance. But with Ethan, it felt different. She could feel herself opening up in ways she never had before. "I'm scared," she whispered, the vulnerability in her voice startling even her. "I don't know if I'm ready to be so open. But at the same time, I want to be with you. I want to stop hiding." Ethan smiled, a mixture of relief and affection in his eyes. "We don't have to rush, Claire. We'll take it slow. But I need you to know that I'm in this for the long haul, and I'm ready to face whatever comes with you." Claire squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of his words sink in. For the first time in a while, she felt at peace with the decision. She didn't have all the answers, but she didn't need to. She knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. As they sat there, in the quiet of the cabin with the setting sun casting its final rays over the lake, Claire realized that she wasn't just ready to face the world with Ethan. She was ready to trust him, to build a future with him. She didn't know exactly how it would unfold, but she knew that together, they could handle anything. "Okay," she said softly, her voice steady. "Let's do it. Let's take the next step, together." Ethan's smile widened, his heart lifting as he pulled her into a gentle embrace. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, Claire felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Together, they would take the next step, one that would define their future, not just as individuals, but as partners in life. It had been a few weeks since Claire and Ethan decided to take the next step in their relationship, no longer hiding in the shadows, but openly acknowledging their bond. And while it hadn't been easy, they were learning to navigate the new challenges that came with being public about their connection. They had spent countless hours discussing how to manage both their personal and professional lives, carefully walking the line between love and work. Their colleagues had mostly accepted the change, though some still raised an eyebrow, and a few whispered when they thought no one was listening. Claire had spent the majority of her career trying to be seen for her accomplishments, not for her relationships, and now, the idea of her private life being scrutinized left her feeling vulnerable in ways she hadn't expected. But over time, the pressure of it all had begun to feel lighter. Ethan, for his part, had been nothing but supportive. He respected Claire's need for privacy and her dedication to her career, but he couldn't help but feel relieved that they were no longer hiding. Each day he spent with Claire, his feelings for her grew stronger, and the more time they shared, the more certain he became that he was willing to face any challenges that came their way, as long as they were together. One Thursday evening, after a particularly long week at work, Claire and Ethan decided to grab dinner at one of their favorite spots. The restaurant, quiet and intimate, was a place where they could talk without feeling like they were under a microscope. As they sat down at a table by the window, the gentle hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses in the background provided a comforting ambience. Ethan smiled at Claire, his eyes soft with affection. "How's your day been?" he asked, his voice gentle. Claire smiled, though she could still see the faint traces of stress in her eyes. "Busy," she said with a sigh, resting her chin on her hand. "A little overwhelming, but I'm getting through it." Ethan nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "I get it. You've been working so hard, and I can see how much it means to you. But you need to take time for yourself, too." Claire looked down at the table, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "I don't know, Ethan," she said quietly. "I feel like everything's coming to a head. People at work are starting to notice. I can't ignore that. And what if I'm making the wrong choice? What if I'm risking my career for something that won't last?" Ethan reached across the table and took her hand in his touch steady and comforting. "You're not risking anything, Claire. You've worked hard for everything you've achieved, and you've earned the right to make your own choices. Whatever happens with us, you're still the same person you've always been. You're still that amazing, driven woman I admire." Claire's chest tightened at his words. She had always been so focused on her goals, so used to pushing herself to achieve more, but somewhere along the way, she had forgotten that it was okay to have something personal, something real, to hold on to. She had spent so long trying to protect herself, to keep her heart safe, but with Ethan, she was beginning to realize that maybe it was time to take a risk. "I don't want to hide anymore," Claire said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to keep pretending like nothing's changed when it has." Ethan smiled, a warmth in his eyes that made Claire's heart skip a beat. "Then don't," he said simply. "We don't have to pretend, Claire. We can figure this out together. One step at a time." Claire took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief settle in her chest. "You're right," she said, her voice steady now. "I've been holding on to fear for so long, and I think it's time to let go of it." Ethan squeezed her hand gently, his gaze unwavering. "I'll be right here with you, every step of the way." The conversation shifted after that, the weight that had been lingering between them finally lifting. They talked about their work, their goals, and everything in between, finding comfort in the shared space between them. The rest of the evening was spent in quiet contentment, their connection stronger than ever. As they left the restaurant, Claire felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. Later that evening, as they walked through the park, the world around them seemed to fade. They didn't need to talk about everything, but just being together, enjoying the simple moments, was enough. Claire realized that the fear she had carried for so long didn't need to control her anymore. She could still be the person she had always been, strong, independent, and driven, while also being open to love and to the possibility of something deeper. In the weeks that followed, Claire and Ethan continued to grow closer, supporting each other through the challenges that came their way. They still had obstacles to face. Balancing work and personal life was never easy, but they knew they could face them together. The uncertainty that had once loomed so large in Claire's mind began to fade, replaced by a sense of excitement for the future, a future that now included Ethan. And as they walked through life, hand in hand, Claire knew that, no matter what happened, she had made the right choice. She was no longer afraid of the unknown. She was ready to embrace whatever came next, with Ethan by her side. It had been a few weeks since Claire and Ethan made the decision to embrace their relationship fully, no longer hiding in the shadows, but walking side by side through the challenges that came with it. Their connection had grown stronger, but the journey hadn't been without its bumps. While they had made the commitment to each other, both still carried a bit of hesitation when it came to their professional lives. Claire, in particular, had struggled to find the balance between being seen as a capable, independent professional and embracing her growing relationship with Ethan. She had worked so hard to build her career and reputation, and the fear of judgment or the consequences of her personal life interfering with her professional world still lingered in the back of her mind. Ethan, on the other hand, was more at ease with the situation. He had never been one to shy away from making bold decisions, but he also respected Claire's cautious nature and the way she approached everything with deliberate care. He knew that the last thing she wanted was for their relationship to jeopardize everything she had worked for, and he made a silent vow to support her every step of the way, no matter what. One evening, after a particularly busy workday, Ethan invited Claire to dinner. It was a quiet restaurant on the edge of town, one they had visited several times before. It had become their spot, the place where they could relax, away from the bustle of the office. As they sat down at their usual table, Ethan could sense that Claire seemed a little more distant than usual. Her gaze focused on the menu, but her mind clearly somewhere else. "Claire," Ethan said gently, breaking the silence, "is everything okay?" Claire paused, looking up from the menu with a slight frown. "Yeah, I'm fine," she replied quickly, though Ethan could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "It's just, work has been a lot lately. I'm trying to keep everything together, you know?" Ethan nodded, leaning forward slightly. "I get it. But you don't have to do it alone. You know I'm here for you, right? Whatever you need, whenever you need it." Claire smiled, grateful for his support, but still unsure. "I know, but it's just, there's so much on the line. And I'm not sure if I'm ready to let go of control, you know? What if things go wrong? What if we can't keep it all together?" Ethan reached across the table and took her hand, his grip warm and firm. "We don't know what the future holds, Claire," he said softly. "But what I do know is that I'm not going anywhere. I want to be with you, and I believe in us. We'll figure it out together." Claire's heart swelled at his words, the tension that had been building in her chest easing just a little. She had always been so independent, so used to being in control of every aspect of her life. But with Ethan, she was starting to understand that sometimes letting go and trusting someone else wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. "I want to believe that too," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I want to believe that we can handle this, no matter what comes our way." Ethan smiled, his eyes filled with affection. "I know we can," he said confidently. "As long as we're in this together, we'll make it through anything." After their dinner, they took a walk in the cool night air, the quiet of the city surrounding them. The weight of the conversation lingered, but in the best possible way. They both knew that things weren't going to be perfect. Relationships never were. But they had each other, and that was enough. Over the next few days, they continued to navigate their relationship, still careful not to let it interfere with their work lives. Claire continued to focus on her career, determined to prove herself. But she found herself opening up more to Ethan, allowing herself to be vulnerable in ways she hadn't before. They spent their free time together, enjoying simple moments like long walks in the park, quiet dinners at home, and nights spent talking about everything and nothing. It wasn't just about love anymore. It was about building something deeper, something lasting. Claire had always been afraid to take risks, to let go of control, but with Ethan, she was starting to see that taking that risk wasn't such a scary thing after all. She was learning that she didn't have to sacrifice her dreams to be with him. Instead, she could have both. One morning, as they were both getting ready for work, Claire paused in front of the mirror, adjusting her blouse. Ethan stood behind her, his eyes soft with admiration as he watched her. "You look incredible," he said, his voice filled with genuine affection. Claire glanced up at him in the mirror, her lips curling into a small smile. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice almost shy. "You always know how to make me feel good about myself." Ethan smiled and stepped closer, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Because you are incredible, Claire," he said softly. "Inside and out. And I'm proud of everything you've achieved." Claire felt a rush of warmth at his words. For so long, she had kept herself guarded, afraid to show vulnerability, afraid to let anyone in. But with Ethan, she felt seen in a way she never had before. It wasn't just about the career or the success. He saw her for who she truly was, and that meant more to her than anything. "I'm glad we're doing this, Ethan," she said, her voice steady. "I'm glad we're facing everything together." Ethan kissed the top of her head, his voice filled with quiet confidence. "Me too, Claire. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together." And for the first time, Claire felt like she was ready to face whatever came next, not with fear or doubt, but with hope. They had taken the leap, and now they would face whatever the future held side by side. It had been several months since Claire and Ethan took that crucial step in their relationship. They had come a long way, growing closer and stronger through the challenges they had faced together. The whispers at work had died down, replaced with a quiet acceptance. The bond they shared, once a secret, was no longer something to hide. It wasn't always easy, but they had built something real, something that felt worth every hurdle they'd overcome. Claire had always been driven, fiercely independent, and determined to succeed on her own terms. But over time, she realized that having someone by her side, someone who supported her, didn't make her weak, it made her stronger. Ethan, on the other hand, had never once doubted their connection. He had always known that what they had was worth fighting for. He had been patient, understanding, and loving, allowing Claire to move at her own pace, while never letting go of his desire to be with her. Their relationship was no longer a source of tension, but instead a quiet strength. They learned how to balance their personal lives with their careers, finding time for each other amidst the busy demands of work. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and it was enough. One sunny Saturday afternoon, after a particularly intense week, Claire and Ethan took a drive to the countryside. It was a spontaneous decision, no plans, no schedules, just the open road and each other. As they drove through winding roads and green fields, Claire couldn't help but feel a sense of calm settle over her. The worries and anxieties that had once consumed her seemed distant now. She had made the right choice. They had made the right choice. Ethan pulled into a small park by a lake, the sun casting golden light over the water. They got out of the car, stretching and breathing in the fresh air. It felt like a moment of peace in the middle of the chaos of their lives. They walked down to the water's edge, taking their time, enjoying the simplicity of the moment. "It's beautiful here," Claire said, looking out at the calm lake, the ripples gently lapping at the shore. Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on her. "It's peaceful," he agreed. "Just like this. Just us." Claire smiled softly, feeling the warmth of his words. "I like it," she said quietly. "I like being here with you, away from everything." Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both of her hands in his. "Claire," he began, his voice steady but full of emotion, "we've been through a lot together. And I know it hasn't always been easy. But what we have, what we've built, it's real. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Claire's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had known, deep down, that this moment was coming, but hearing it from him still took her by surprise. She had spent so long building walls around herself, afraid to open up completely, afraid of losing herself in something that could fall apart. But with Ethan, she felt like she had finally found someone who understood her, someone who saw her for who she truly was. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "I don't have all the answers. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to be with you. I'm ready. I'm ready to take that step." Ethan's face lit up with a smile that made Claire's heart swell. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and she felt the world melt away. The doubts, the fears, everything seemed insignificant in that moment. It was just the two of them, standing together, facing the future side by side. "We're in this together," Ethan said softly, his voice full of promise. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." They stood there for a few more minutes, just holding each other, watching the sun dip lower in the sky. Claire realized that, in that moment, she had never felt more certain of anything in her life. The path ahead wasn't going to be without its challenges, but she wasn't afraid anymore. With Ethan by her side, she knew they could handle anything. As they walked back to the car, their hands intertwined, Claire felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. She had spent so many years trying to control every aspect of her life, building walls around her heart to protect herself. But now, she understood that letting go, trusting someone else, didn't make her weak, it made her stronger. She had found someone who loved her for who she truly was, and that was enough. They didn't need to have everything figured out right now. They didn't need to know exactly where their journey would take them, but they were ready to face it together. And that, Claire realized, was all that mattered. Ethan kissed the top of her head as they drove back toward the city. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was certain, they would walk it together. Their love, once a quiet secret, had become the foundation of everything they were building. And as they looked toward the future, hand in hand, they knew that whatever came next, they were ready for it. Together. In this captivating journey, we explore a unique and inspiring love story set in the high-paced world of ambitious professionals. Claire and Ethan, two individuals driven by success and career goals, find themselves navigating the complexities of workplace relationships. As they move through the ups and downs of balancing personal and professional lives, their bond grows stronger, creating a story full of passion, trust, and uncertainty. Through these millionaire stories, Claire and Ethan's connection develops from a secret to an open commitment, showing the trials and tribulations of stepping into a relationship while maintaining professional integrity. Along the way, they face fears of judgment and the pressure of external expectations, all while learning to trust each other and take risks for love. As their journey unfolds, they discover the importance of support, patience, and understanding in building a lasting relationship. This narrative highlights the struggles and triumphs of falling in love in a world where success is measured by achievements, and the stakes are high. Through every challenge, Claire and Ethan realize that love, when nurtured with care and honesty, can thrive even in the most challenging of environments. In these millionaire stories, we witness how Claire, once guarded and focused solely on her career, learns to let go of fear and embrace vulnerability. Ethan, steadfast and supportive, shows her that trust and love are worth fighting for. As their relationship continues to evolve, they make decisions that not only shape their personal futures, but also reflect their commitment to each other. From their first cautious steps toward openness to the deeper understanding of each other's needs, this story unfolds with emotional depth and powerful moments of connection. With each passing day, Claire and Ethan learn that while the future may be uncertain, facing it together makes all the difference in the world. These millionaire stories reveal the true power of love, trust, and the willingness to embrace what is real, no matter the challenges that lie ahead.